What's going on, everyone? So this is something new I haven't done on the channel before. This is my podcast, the Backstage Journal podcast. And the podcast is not new. I'm about halfway through season 2. There's probably, 30, 35 episodes before this one. But I've never put it on the main YouTube channel before. And I'm doing it now for a few reasons. And primarily because I think things are kind of crazy right now. And I figure maybe this is some small thing that I can do to maybe help alleviate some kind of, anxiety, or help you get your mind off of the current events and all the craziness that's happening in the world right now. So for the foreseeable future, I'm going to be uploading all of the new episodes of the Backstage Journal podcast here on the YouTube channel in long video interview form every Wednesday for the foreseeable future. This week's guest is Adam Neely, and we had a really, really awesome conversation last week over Skype. And some congratulations are in order for Adam because he just hit, as of yesterday, the 23rd of March, just hit 1 million subscribers on YouTube, which is a huge milestone and very well deserved. So well done, Adam. Congratulations. We talked about that a little bit in the interview, but we'll get to that in just a minute. Like I said, if you are into this kind of thing, posting the podcast on the YouTube channel, please let me know. Leave a comment down below, leave a like, and let me know if this is the kind of thing you want to see more of or more consistently on the channel. I love making the podcast and getting to sit down with people. I've had some incredible guests on here so far. So if you want to go back and listen to old episodes of the podcast, you can do that a few different ways. It's on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play. It's on my website, and there's also a YouTube video playlist linked down below with all of the previous episodes in audio form for you to go back and listen to if you like what we're doing here in this episode. I just want to give a quick shout out to one of the sponsors of the podcast, which is Sweetwater. They provided the Rodecaster that I'm using to record the podcast. I picked this up for season 2, and this thing has been incredible. So if you're thinking about starting a podcast of your own, or maybe looking for a cool piece of gear to do some home recording with, the Rodecaster has been great, and huge thanks to Sweetwater for providing it. I'll have all the gear linked in the description box down below that I use to create the podcast if you are thinking of starting a podcast of your own. It'll all be linked down below. I'm going to keep this intro short, though, because Adam and I, like I said, had a really great interview last week, and I want to get into it. So without further ado, here is Adam Neely. I'm rolling.
Okay, we are rolling on camera. 24 frames per second, 4,000 pixels, or what does 4K stand for? 4,000, it's pixels per the thing. Yeah, right.
Yeah, technically the it's like 3840 or 3860 by 20 something, so they're rounding up.
Unless you're doing true cinema widescreen when it's 4096, and that's the setting. Anyway, whatever.
I'm really glad you actually know that. Most people I talk to, other YouTube creators, they don't know much about cameras. And by most people, I mean Rick Beato doesn't really know anything about cameras.
I don't actually know any. I just was looking up some settings on my GH5, and it's like, oh, I could make it even wider if I wanted to. So that's,
right. Nice. Well, dude, thanks for coming on the podcast, man. Welcome.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here. I just listened to your interview with Mary yesterday, and it was really, really good, man. But before we get into all that, how are you holding up in all this craziness that's going on right now?
Well, thankfully, because my career is a YouTuber, I don't have to leave my apartment that often. So nothing in that realm has actually changed a whole lot. But, it is very different. A lot of musicians have lost a lot of work very, very quickly. And that has been the most scary thing, I think. For me, I basically had 2 tours canceled. I was going to be talking at South by Southwest. There's some conferences I was going to. There was a conference in April, which has been postponed, that Ableton does every year called Loop. and it's this really awesome electronic music thing, and it was going to be in Berlin, but they've had to postpone that. So my schedule's been wiped clean, and that's a good and bad thing for me. But, seeing all my friends and all my musical colleagues without work has been very, stressful for everybody.
Yeah.
How about you? How have you been dealing with it?
I haven't had that much cancellation yet. I've lost 2 gigs. But my tour schedule really wasn't set to pick up until late April, early May. And so now we're starting to see the stuff getting rescheduled. So my tour through early May is going to be in August and all this kind of stuff. So it all just depends on how long this stuff goes on, right? Like we could make that rescheduling happen in August or not. I mean, it's kind of, everything is still up in the air, and we're still relatively early on in all this. But like you, I've seen a lot of my musician friends in Nashville and here in Atlanta really starting to kind of freak out because they're losing their primary source of income. And that was actually one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, was sort of, I think this is going to start shifting some things in the creative community. I think we're already starting to see it, right? Where a lot of musicians and artists are starting to take to social media to continue to play and continue to work. And I think this is going to really highlight for a lot of people the power that social media and all these platforms have.
I agree. And it's been interesting, especially the past week, where there have been a lot of musician friends reaching out about content strategies and, how to use Patreon and how to use Instagram and all these things. And, there's a silver lining in everything, but that I feel like is the silver lining here, is people really now starting to see the true power and the potential of all these tools that have been available to us this entire time. And now the exigency, the immediacy of this, threat, this global pandemic, making it so that people have to turn to these things. And, people who have been in this game for a little bit of time, like you and me, and Rick and Mary and everybody else, content creators, have a very serious leg up on everybody else in the sense that we know how these things work. But at the same time, now the bar is going to be raised, I feel like, a lot higher, because now everybody is going to be jumping in on this. And this is going to be a paradigm shift that happens very, very quickly, I think, especially if this shutdown goes on for longer than 2 months, which I think is a very real possibility. I feel like this could be a lot bigger than we even think it is. All these people entering the creative space so quickly, especially since there is going to be a global, economic, what are we calling it? A recession, depression, etc.
Yeah,
it's going to be bad.
I have no idea. Right.
But it is going to change. I think this is the catalyst for change that will happen sooner than later, for sure.
It's a mixed bag of emotions on my end as well. It's like, okay, on one hand, I think it's exciting that people are starting to realize the power of all this stuff, and it is going to become a more saturated and more competitive market, which I think is not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
But you have to also balance that with the fact that, world economies are taking a pretty big hit already. And what does that mean for self-employed creative people, musicians, artists? What does that mean for YouTube content creators? What does that mean for anybody that is making a living from a skill set type model? I mean, I don't know, man. It's going to be a really interesting ride over the next couple months. And I agree with you that I think this could very well go on longer than 8 weeks. And, it's just, it's interesting times right now.
Yeah. I mean, I said that being a content creator, we're somewhat insulated from, the freelance nature of this, and everybody's losing jobs and gigs. But, I saw something on Twitter recently about how YouTube has actually had to pare down its content review team and basically rely a lot more on artificial intelligence and machine learning to do, reviews of videos for whether or not videos are acceptable for the, content, for community guidelines. So basically they're giving it all up to AI and machine learning. And in the tweets, they said, we realize that sometimes videos will be flagged even though they haven't violated the terms of service, which basically means AI is just going to be randomly flagging things and there's nothing we can do about it. And so that is, a real serious thing because YouTube's team has had to downsize because of this pandemic. Basically, all content online is now just going to be at the hands of kind of crappy AI. So this will accelerate other things that are not the greatest thing also that would actually really deeply affect people who you would think would not be as affected by this whole thing as, musicians or service workers or people who are in immediate, have immediate financial loss. So there's a lot of things changing very quickly, very, very quickly.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's nerve-wracking, and I don't know. I don't know how to feel about it right now. It's so new, and
it's hard to process, honestly. Like day to day is, I don't know.
Right. So let's not spend the whole conversation because I know whenever you and I get together and start talking about stuff, we can tend to deep dive on certain subjects.
For sure.
And I do want to do that in this conversation, but not necessarily on COVID-19, because everybody, I feel like, is doing that right now.
Of course.
I want a little bit of background on you. So I'm pretty much almost all of my listeners are probably familiar with you and what you do, but in terms of what you do on YouTube and in your musical career, but where did all of this start for you? How did you get into music and your education and your professional career before YouTube? What does that look like?
For sure. Well, I come from a somewhat musical family. My mom is a voice teacher and my dad is a lover of music. But my whole mom's side of the family are all musicians. And so I grew up with music around me. And my mom actually had a career as a contemporary classical soprano singer, meaning that she had... she would be working with people like John Cage, the crazy experimental American composer. The story I like to tell about, and she likes to tell about when she was working with him, she was singing a piece that John Cage had composed when I had just been born. And John Cage wanted everybody in the ensemble to play and sing two instruments. So she said, well, I sing, but I could also play guitar. And he was like, nah, that's boring. Oh, I could also play piano. He was like, nah, that's boring. And she happened to have my busy box. When you're an infant, you have these little boxes where bells and things to turn to keep the infant busy. So she was like, well, I have my son's busy box. And John Cage was like, yes, I want that. So she sang and played this little toy for kids. So that was kind of the environment that I was brought up in. But then my dad had a deep love for the Beatles and Bob Dylan, and also introduced me to a lot of jazz music when I was young. So I was kind of growing up in this environment. And I picked up bass when I was 13. There was a band that was starting in school, and they needed a bass player. It's a tale as old as time. So I played bass. And I grew up playing bass in jazz band in high school. And from there, I went to Berkeley in Boston, and then eventually got my master's degree at the Manhattan School of Music in New York. And it was basically kind of this, process from the beginning. I was always exploring different styles of music, but with one foot in really weird experimental music and one foot in popular music. And that's kind of my musical background. My musical upbringing came from all that. And I moved to New York in 2010 to start a career as a session musician, as somebody, playing bass behind people, because I really, really enjoyed playing bass. I know that's my instrument. I found my voice on bass. I really like the control and the power and the feeling of being at the center of everything. Not necessarily being up front. Musically, everything is centered around the bass, but I'm not in front of everybody. So, that's where I came from. That's where I started. That's not necessarily how I started my YouTube channel, but that is my musical background.
So at what point, when you were a kid playing bass in school, what point did you realize, okay, I think I want to pursue this as a profession?
Yeah. Well, I remember there was a very specific moment. My mom had gotten me tickets to a masterclass with the great jazz pianist Dave Brubeck, who has since passed, but I got to see him before he passed, and Christian McBride, who's a fantastic upright double bass player. And they were conducting a masterclass, and when I saw them, I was about 14 years old, I saw them improvise and play jazz music at a very, very high level. And I had never seen that before, especially never seen people at that level before. You know, maybe I'd seen some jazz band play at like a restaurant or something like that, because let's be honest, that's where jazz band usually play. But I'd never seen it like that. And they were having so much fun on stage. They were improvising and playing. It seemed like that they were speaking this language. They were laughing. And, you know, I might not have understood all the nuance of what they were doing, but just to see that level of expressiveness and that level of joy, and to see how effortless it was pretty intoxicating. And I remember at that moment that I knew that this is what I wanted to be doing. I knew I wanted to play music. I knew I wanted to have these musical conversations with other people. I knew that I wanted to inspire other people with that level of joy in music making. So it was that moment, the Dave Brubeck, Christian McBride masterclass, when I saw I was 14. I was like, music, that's what I want to do.
That's a pretty powerful story, man.
Yeah.
You know, some people you talk to, it's like, I don't know, I just figured this might be something cool to do, but that's a very definitive moment that you can like point to and say that's, and two legendary, I mean, masters of each one of their instruments, you know. I mean, I feel like that's a really good example of people like that inspiring people to get into music, which is literally what happened, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, I point to that as the definitive moment, but even, you know, at the time, I might not have fully grasped what was happening. And I think whenever you point to a moment, like a definitive moment, you only realize that in retrospect and the story that you want to tell about yourself, honestly. Because I remember it at the time being very affecting, but I've had many affecting moments in my life. And it was only in retrospect where I realized how pivotal that moment was. And I think that's important to say, because especially for young people who might be listening to this, you might not realize the importance of certain things until a lot later on. And I think that story, I love telling it because it's a good story, but you know, it's only something that I've really come to truly realize about myself later. And you know, it's an important point to make. But
yeah, because you don't, I feel like it can generate the expectation with somebody who's young and might be listening that they have to look for that one sort of watershed pinnacle moment. And
yeah,
I completely agree with you that in the moment, it might not actually happen, and it may take 10 or 15 years for you to actually like look back and think, oh man, that was it. That was the thing that pushed me in that direction, you know? So you moved to New York in 2010. You've been there 10 years pretty much. I would say that makes you a New Yorker by this point. I mean,
you know, I might too. My native New York friends might beg to differ, but I've definitely put down roots here. This is kind of where I'm going to be for a while. So yeah, 10 years.
Well,
10 years
from an outsider, from a Georgia boy, from a Southern Georgia kid, you're a New Yorker. You know,
I'm a New Yorker. Why not?
What drew you to the city? And why have you stayed there? Because there's so many stories of friends of mine that are now in Nashville and who spent time there. It's like you seem to go to New York for some kind of inspiration or to be part of a scene, and then most people I know just spend a certain amount of time there and then they get out and they go somewhere else. But what's made you stick around so long?
Yeah, I call it graduating from New York. This is many musician colleague friends of mine do graduate from New York and move to Nashville or LA, usually Nashville or LA, let's be honest. So yeah, the reason why I originally came to New York is if you play jazz music, this is where you go. Like 100%, this is where jazz music really found its voice in American culture, and where it still has a very, very powerful voice, institutional voice too, because Jazz at Lincoln Center has a bunch of programs here, and then there's the whole downtown scene, which is different from the uptown scene. There's a lot of stuff happening, and it's very exciting for a young person. Of course, the problem with New York is that the quality of life for how much money you pay to live here is incredibly low. It's quite oppressive just how many people are in the city. It's hard to live if you don't have a whole lot of money. And the only time where, you can get away with that, really, if you're a struggling artist, is if you're young. Otherwise, you probably want to live somewhere else with a higher quality of life for how much money you make. I got very lucky in the fact that I now have a YouTube career, so I don't have to slum it as much as I did back in the day. And that's part of the reason why I'm in New York. If I wasn't doing YouTube, I would have probably left New York by now, to be 100% honest. I love the energy here. I love the creativity here. I love the scene here. There is a certain feeling. And, this is one thing that I notice a lot. And I've actually talked to a mutual friend of ours, Ryan Connor of Dynamo, about this, about how musicians play in different cities. It's very different. And you go to any city and you see the local cats play there, and there's a certain feeling in every place, especially in cities where there's a strong music scene. And Nashville has a strong music scene. Atlanta has a strong music scene. I've just connected with how the musicians play, their rhythmic feel, their sense of music making. I've just connected with that in New York more than any other place. And with how interconnected everything is, we live in a global society. There's still something to be said about localization. There is a different feeling in different cities. There is a different music in different cities that can't just be transmitted over the internet. And I think that's an important thing to consider if you're a musician and wanting to know where you end up, is what is the music like in that city? And that's not going to change no matter how interconnected anything is, I think.
Dude, I agree with that. And you've been able to put that into words, something that Tilly and I have felt for a while. We had been considering moving to Nashville for the past few years and since decided against it. And for me, musically, that's a big part of it. Is I like the sound of Atlanta.
I agree. I like it more than Nashville too.
Georgia has a crazy rich musical history. I mean, you look at the artists and just acts that have come out of this state over the last 100 years or so. In Atlanta specifically, especially as a guitar player, I like the Atlanta sound. And to speak about New York more specifically, I go to New York 2 or 3 times a year to gig or just, it's honestly, New York is one of my favorite places in the world. I adore that city. It's a little rough, it's fast, it's busy, there's a buzz, there's an energy to it that unless you've been there, there's no other city in the world remotely close to Manhattan and Brooklyn. And my first few times going there, it made sense what you're saying of this city has a feel and it has a sound and it comes through in the music that's created there,
Yeah, there's this, for lack of a better term, there's this aggression. And there's something very special about seeing, Wayne Krantz is world-renowned guitar player. And he plays, I'm not sure, well, he's not playing right now, but he normally plays at the 55 bar every Thursday to about 20, 30 people. Stuff that you could easily see him play in gigantic theaters, or you should see him play in gigantic theaters, because the level of musicianship is mind-blowing. Just the stuff that he's doing on guitar is unreal, and he's playing so intensely and aggressively, and you're just sitting there in this tiny basement bar what is happening right now? The world is exploding in front of my face, and this is just a normal day in New York City. And I love
that so much.
And there's something about that of just that I still just cannot get enough of. Of course, that translates into every other aspect of your life, and at some point you just want to be all right, I just want to chill and not worry about somebody taking a dump on the subway, and that's the reason why nobody is in that subway car, which is the more typical daily reality of living in New York.
Right.
But yeah, I love it, the locality. And, I think we're drawn to cities and places where we can feel the most fulfilled like that. And I'm very lucky to have found a home here in New York.
Yeah, that's a good thing, man. Hold on to that. as long as you can. So speaking of finding a home, how did you find your voice on YouTube? So before you answer that, I'm going to pay you a compliment here.
Oh,
you are without a doubt one of my favorite YouTube creators.
thank you, man.
Every video of yours that I watch, even if it's something that I think like, oh, that's not really, I'm not a jazz musician, I'm not a jazz guitarist, but every single one of your videos I watch to the end. They're incredibly well done. They're compelling, they're entertaining, they're informative. The best sort of, I guess, comparison I can draw is you are sort of the musical version of Veritasium, Vsauce, Smarter Every Day, which I mean is like the highest compliment because those are some of the best channels on the internet, period.
Thank you, man.
So how did you develop this style of YouTube video?
Well, I steal. Every good artist, and not to say that I'm a good artist, but I try to be, every good artist steals. And I was very inspired by a channel which does not exist anymore. I mean, it still exists, but they're not uploading anymore. It's called PBS Idea Channel. And the host is a guy by the name of Mike Rignetta. And PBS Idea Channel was basically, it was kind of in the vein of like Bill Nye the Science Guy, Veritasium. It was, in that vein, but it wasn't science. It was media, digital media literacy, philosophy, and pop culture all in one. And it was a really, really engaging channel. One video, it's such a ridiculous premise, but they made it so interesting. Like, how is Magic the Gathering, the card game, like jazz? I'm like, that's so stupid. But then they make this video and I'm like, oh, that's great. That's amazing. I love it. Really engaging animations and a whole like style that was associated with it. And I was like, well, this is inspiring. I think I want to try and do that, but maybe for bass guitar, because I initially started as a bass lessons channel, or at least when I started posting regularly. And then that very quickly kind of careened off the rails into a general music channel because I realized that, well, I play bass and I like bass. I don't like bass to the exclusion of everything else that I want to explore in music. So it kind of then spiraled out from that. So initially, if you look back maybe 4 or 5 years, a lot of my videos were very much kind of trying to be PBS Idea Channel. And then it's since kind of developed from there. And, I've always been independent, basically just me. Occasionally I'll hire an editor for larger projects, but it's for the most part, all the animations, all the editing, everything is just done by me. And because of that, I've had to develop some shortcuts. I've had to develop different like formats for my videos. One format that I'm inspired by what you do all the time is the idea of the gig vlog or the tour vlog. And, I started doing that maybe a year or two ago just with my cell phone, but it very like quickly developed into something else. And I've seen you do that and kind of blow that out into this entirely different style, which I think is really exciting to see what you've done with it. It's very inspiring. Thanks, too, because like now that's forced me to up my game, or at least inspired me to at least try and up my game whenever I'm trying to vlog or do anything while I'm on tour or performing. So I think that's actually a testament to, to how how different people's styles inform each other. And if somebody is trying and developing a style, or developing things, it will inspire other people to develop things and really push the envelope. So for me, it was PBS Idea Channel with Mike Rignetta circa 2015, 2016, which really kind of kickstarted everything.
Yeah. Well, I think you found such a unique style, in your normal, well, quote unquote normal, because the thing I like is pretty much every one of your videos is unique. It's like it can stand alone as its own sort of, I forget, was it Mary, I think, that used the term video essay? Somebody I was listening to referred to your stuff as video essays. And I think that's a really good way to think about it. But it's also, it can stand in a group and kind of be consumed as serial content, one right after another, which is a testament to, I think that's incredibly hard to do. I think people don't really think about that, but YouTube channels, basically, we are our own television networks. Right?
Yep.
And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on where do you see all this stuff going in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I see this is the big thing that I've noticed, and I'm sure. Actually, let me ask you this: who are your demographics when you look at the analytics in terms of age? Because I bet you I know what the gender, or at least the way that the gender breakdown is on YouTube.
Yeah.
But in terms of age, who are the majority of your watchers?
Primarily 18 to 24 is first, and then 25 to 34 is second.
Exactly. So the big thing that I see happening, YouTube is a very young person-oriented platform. YouTube, there's a culture that surrounds it that primarily consists of, I'll call it our generation, but not even really our generation, because we're kind of old. Like our watchers are not really our age, generally 5 to 10 years younger. I see this only growing because of that, because we have an entire generation who has become encultured and grew up on us, which is something that I can't even begin to understand the responsibility, the social responsibility, and the feelings that are associated with that. So I see that growing, and I see it becoming more and more professionalized and more standardized. And it's already kind of gone that way. Not so much in our music YouTuber niche, but in other niches for sure. And like the beauty vlog niche and, gaming niches. And that can be a good and bad thing. I think it can be a good thing because it legitimizes what we're trying to do, but it's a bad thing because it might homogenize it a little bit too much. I look at, my friend Ben Levin is very strange content creator, but very beloved because he has a very weird sort of avant-garde niche. It's his content might not fit within the homogenized like YouTube content format that might be necessitated in 5 to 10 years. I'm not sure if that's necessarily the case, but I just see it becoming more standardized because it's going to become more popular, if that makes any sense.
So you're coming up on 1 million subscribers, right?
Terrifying.
What are you at right now, roughly?
9. Probably by the time that this comes out, I'll be at 1 million. But 996,000.
Well, let me be the first then to congratulate you on 1 million subscribers,
Woo,
man.
1 million.
That is genuinely, that is a very big deal, and it's well deserved. So congratulations. And
thank you.
My next question based on that, this is something that I've experienced recently. Do you ever kind of have moments of, holy shit, what am I doing? There's hundreds of thousands of people about to watch me talk about this thing.
Yeah.
Hold on, let's pump the brakes here. Is this normal? Is this okay?
Yeah. So for when I'm doing off the cuff vlog moments where I'm just like talking to the camera, it's becoming harder and harder for me to do that. And I edit the ever living shit out of everything I say to make sure that I say it in exactly the right way, that I stand by what it is that I say. It's becoming harder and harder for me to not do that. So, I'll script out half my videos, and the other videos I like really make sure that I like do a bunch of takes to make sure I say exactly how I want to say this and not mess anything up. Because their words have power, especially when you have such a big audience. And it is something that I've had to live with for like several years now. And the biggest thing, like the biggest moment that I realized that my words have power were, I made a Q&A video, like, these videos where I just answer people's questions and I kind of just like, talk a little bit about it. Where I was talking about how in a very like traditional form of classical theory, the perfect fourth, the interval of a perfect fourth, like C to F, is considered dissonant, at least for certain kind of voice leading kind of things. I mean, it's not really dissonant, but like it's effectively dissonant. So I, talk a little bit about that, but I don't really go that much in depth. And then I just remember talking to a kid who had come up to me in like a Guitar Center or something like that, a music store, where he had just seen that video, and he was talking about, very excitedly talking and arguing with his music teacher about how a perfect fourth is dissonant because Adam Neely said that. And I realized, whoa, wait a second. There's there's a whole thing about this. I just said this off the cuff because it's kind of related to this question that somebody was talking about. But now this kid thinks this thing purely because I said it, not because of any of the context around that. And that really scared me. And it made me start really thinking about, okay, I have a responsibility. I have a real responsibility. And thank God it was about this really dumb little music theory question rather than something a lot larger and more far-reaching. But people listen, especially young people. They're impressionable. So there is a kind of responsibility that comes along with that. I don't know. How are you feeling about this? Do you feel like whenever you say anything about guitar or anything about music or anything about how you're playing or thinking or feeling, do you feel a responsibility at all, or is it just more the fear? Because I feel both all the time.
I would agree. I feel both. I feel the responsibility because I have had a few moments more recently. You know, my channel has grown pretty substantially, and so this is kind of new to me. I've only been doing this for 2 years now at this point.
Which is insane to me, man. Like the level of growth. I know you hang out with Rick Beato all the time, but like how fast you've grown is insane to me. So
it's a bit like drinking from a fire hose. Thank you. It is like drinking from a fire hose. And this is part of that, where I kind of, sometimes I worry that I'm outgrowing my ability, or my channel is outgrowing my ability as a musician, as a content creator, as a person. I mean, look, dude, I've only been playing guitar professionally for coming on 10 years now. You know, we're both kind of still in the first 10 years of our professional careers as musicians. And yet so many people, at least from my perspective, you know, treat what I say as the authority on whatever I might be talking about, whether it's a piece of gear or how to play something, what to record on, whatever it is. And that scares the shit out of me, because I look at so many other guitar players, guys who are, you know, the people that I really look up to, as far as musicians go, and even my peers, you know, friends like Ryan Connors, for example, like people who I can objectively look at or go to their show and be like, yeah, those players are just on a completely different level than me. Why should anybody listen to what I'm saying when these guys and girls are out here just killing it? So it's a combination of panic, fear, and it's all wrapped up with a beautiful bow of imposter syndrome right on top of it. I'm holding it together, but there are certainly days where I'm like, what am I doing, man?
I fully agree. You know, I'm a bass player, but that's not, you know, my content isn't always bass related. In fact, it's pretty rarely bass related. And I don't feel like I'm that much of a good bass player. I mean, I'm okay, but you know, I feel like I shine when I'm in front of a camera and editing videos and things like that. And the level of imposter syndrome is so real, especially when I know if those bass players, or if I know if those musicians get in front of a camera and start doing their thing in earnest, or it's not even getting in front of a camera. It's just I know what they do, and they're just incredible. But we just happen to have gotten really good at this content creation thing. And I think that's something that's worthwhile. I think that is a very worthy thing, and that is a skill that I have been told over and over again by many musicians whom I respect very, very deeply, that they envy what it is that we do, or they think that what we do is really good, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, it's hard to feel that, especially when you're trying to play your instrument and that's the thing that you connect with the most. And this is just kind of a fun thing that it ended up being a career. Honestly, like this is a fun thing for me that ended up being a career. And I very much enjoy doing it. And I love making YouTube videos, but I'm a bass player and I'm a musician. If that makes, I'm sure you understand, but
I feel the exact same way.
Yeah. That's something, of course I struggle with a lot. And I don't think that, I mean, I don't want to put any words in Rick Beato's mouth, but I don't think he struggles with that, because he's already done the musician thing and done the career,
right? And
he already proved himself. Whereas we are still having to prove ourselves in that community and with those people that we respect and we want to be part of. again, I'm not speaking for you either. I'm speaking for myself. So sorry if that.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, I would completely agree with everything you just said. I mean, I look at, so my perfect example of that, well, other than Rick, would be like Tim Pierce.
Yeah. I was going to bring, yeah.
And dude, Tim Pierce is who I want to be when I grow up. You know, he's played on everything. He's been on, you know, just about every session out of LA you could imagine for the past almost 40 years. And, you know, for him now, the YouTube and the content creation thing is primarily what he's focusing on. And I feel the same way. It's like, yes, I love making YouTube videos, and I love that this channel has grown and the doors that have opened and the relationships that I've been able to develop through this channel and these opportunities. But at the end of the day, I'm still a guitarist, and I still have aspirations as a musician that I want to meet. And sometimes, and tell me if this is something you've dealt with, I sometimes feel like, you know, when I turn the cameras off, leave my little home studio, and I'm on the road, you know, or in Nashville hanging out with friends at gigs or something, I kind of feel like a little bit of, it's that imposter syndrome thing. Like, oh wait, these people, they're actually doing it, where I am sometimes just making videos talking about doing it. If that makes any sense, I
feel that a lot. It's especially, I mean, there is a level of like disconnect at a certain point, because when people are on certain gigs, you know, this is very much what they need to survive, honestly, because it's their job, and it's very much like the thing that they are really going for. And you know, at certain points, I, you know, don't need to go for certain gigs. I play things because I find them musically rewarding, but at the same time, there isn't like the immediate financial necessity of playing that wedding gig. Although I've stopped playing wedding gigs, but it is very, you know, the same musicians who are playing all these killing like jazz clubs and just really, you know, honestly, motherfuckers are musicians. Excuse my French, but you know, you can swear, okay, or you can censor if you need to, but they are motherfuckers.
Shit.
You know, then there is a disconnect there, because honestly, I don't need to play music ever again. I could just sit here in my room and make YouTube videos about weird musical things and just be done. But that's not what I want to do. That's not who I am. And there are two worlds that have to find some balance, which is very different than I feel like other YouTube niches. You know, a lot of other YouTube niches, you just go full bore on whatever it is that you're doing. But for the working musician, performing musician thing, it's you're making videos and you're performing. And those two worlds are always kind of like not the same. They never fully come together, I think.
Right. And they can compete with each other at times.
Yes.
That's what I've experienced, you know, making the tour vlogs and stuff. It's essentially two full-time jobs on top of one another at the same time. And it hasn't become too much of a problem yet, but I could see it, you know, not being the most sustainable thing depending on how busy things got. But so you brought up wedding gigs.
Yeah.
And not having to do those anymore. And I never did much on the wedding corporate band scene. I did a few here and there, but my version of that, which is not that different, was playing in CCM worship mega churches. And you put out a video recently that is definitely my favorite video of yours, basically talking about why you hate contemporary Christian worship. And for anybody out there who hasn't seen the video, it's not what you might be thinking by the way I just described it. It is incredibly well thought out. It is articulate.
Thank you.
It's not offensive in any way. It's not inflammatory in any way, but you were able to put my feelings about that genre and that experience of playing for about 5 or 6 years. That's what I did almost full time. Like almost every gig I did was in these massive mega churches, playing for tens of thousands of people every weekend, these huge stages, full on production, the whole deal, playing music that was so, in my opinion and experience, lacking and restrictive. And I didn't know how to articulate that. And then you put out this video, and I literally was just sitting there screaming at my computer like, yes, yes. So tell me about that experience, like putting that whole thing together and kind of your conclusion on it.
Well, yeah, it was a whole, I guess, video essay kind of thing. Just exploring why I had such a negative reaction to a lot of worship music, or CCM. And I had many people explain that, or tell me that there's all these differences between worship music and then Christian music and contemporary Christian music and all these different things. But I mainly was reacting to a certain kind of, the thing that you would play in mega churches and have sing-alongs to, Bethel music or Hillsong worship or any of these groups. I was trying to explore my own reactions to them and why I dislike them. And I don't think I really came to any conclusion, but I was trying to explain how I felt the music was restrained in a way that didn't correspond to how I like to make music, which is an ecstatic expression. I like to just like go all in. And part of the reason why I like to live in New York is the feeling of total abandon, total immersion, aggression, feelings of just being so there in the present with your body and just so thrown into the situation, warts and all. And I love New York for that. And I was feeling so restrained, or the feeling I got from all this contemporary Christian music was so restrained. And, I come from a Christian background. I'm not really a practicing Christian right now, but my family on both sides were Presbyterian. And I grew up with like very old school kinds of Christian music, like hymns, and my uncle is a church organist. So there's a certain style of music that I grew up with, which was a little bit different. The kinds of things that my uncle would play are like the Vidor Toccata, which is this insane organ, like, it's the Paganini, it's the 24th Caprice of organ stuff. Maybe organists will say differently, but it's, it's shred, it's organ shred. Really dissonant music too, like really insane stuff that I didn't really understand at the time how much I wanted. Like it's this feeling just like power. But also like this feeling of abandon with it, this feeling like, yeah, we're giving it all. We're not holding back with our worship of God. We're just going full bore. We're having a party, in a very like white Anglo-Saxon Protestant way. And that's how I grew up. Right. And then, being exposed to contemporary worship and the megachurch kind of worship, I was like, there's something missing here. I don't quite know what it is, but there's something very real missing here. And in the video, it was kind of exploring the idea that in certain contexts, people were encouraged to water music down in one way or another, hold back music in one way or another, to make it more accessible for more people, to make it more palatable for more people, and to remove the personal self from the music making and the worship making. And so, the whole video essay was just kind of exploring my own reactions. It wasn't saying one thing is good and one thing is bad. It was really just trying to get to the core of why I hated this music so much. And, it was interesting, all the reactions. Like a lot of people who are worship leaders and a lot of musicians really liked the video. A lot of people said that it was very biased, and that, which was really interesting because I specifically said that this video is entirely my own opinion and I'm not trying to put the opinion on anybody else's. And that's one of the interesting things also of creating online content, is people sometimes don't understand how to consume content or how to understand content, because they really just want to see their own opinion reflected in a content creator. And I see that all the time. I'm sure you get this all the time, of people getting upset because you don't have the same opinion as they do, which is,
every day.
Yeah. So for me, it was just one of two videos actually exploring why we hate music. And I think the reason why I hate the music is because there's something in it that I want the music to be different because of how close it is to me. It's something that's very similar to what it is that I grew up with, but it feels off somehow. It feels distant or corrupt or like dishonest. And, I asked you actually for the first video on the music that we hate, what kinds of music that you might hate. And you said bro country, which I thought was appropriate because you do a lot of like rock and Americana, and that's your guitar style and stuff that I can clearly tell that matters a lot to you. And bro country can definitely feel like a dishonest version of that. But yeah, it was just kind of an exploration of why I hate the music that I hate, and it just happened to be contemporary Christian music. So,
I really appreciated how you did that video and the conclusion that you came to on that video, and it's my same feeling about bro country. The thing I would add to it would be, one of the main reasons I hate bro country, and boy, do I hate it with the burning passion of a billion suns. I hate it. It's because to me, it feels manipulative. You are taking the formula, you're taking the shell of a great, rich musical tradition that is country and Americana music, and you are manipulating it for this like super commercialized sort of watered down, saccharine sweet, fake version of what, Willie Nelson has done, or Johnny Cash, or any of these great country artists, for the purposes of just selling as many, well, not selling anymore, but getting as many streams and as much commercial success as possible, which I understand. I'm not against, financial or commercial success for artists or writers or producers or whoever. But it's like Nashville has found this bullshit formula of the same, country. It's even the people, even a lot of the artists, you can see it's like they were crafted in some bro country tailgate beer sipping lab somewhere. They all look the same, they all dress the same, they're all named Luke or something like that.
Everybody's Luke.
It's everyone's Luke. How many Lukes are there in bro country? And I just hate it. And I hate that I have family members that think because I do music and I play guitar that, oh, well, you must love, these Low Cash or whoever these bands are. It's like, no.
Florida Georgia Line.
All bullshit. God, no, it's all bullshit. And I think the other thing that really makes me angry about it, and it's the same thing with the CCM stuff, there is truly great country and Americana music being made and produced today. There's truly great contemporary worship music being made
of course,
today,
yeah.
But for the most part, it's being overshadowed by this garbage. And that just drives me crazy.
There, in that video that I made asking them about the music that we hate, Paul Davids, who is Dutch, mentioned Dutch carnival music. I don't know. I don't know anything about Dutch carnival music, man. But he really, really hates it. And like I looked it up, and it's kind of goofy, but like it's not something that would inspire rage in me. And it's because I'm not culturally. It's not culturally relevant to me. And that's the thing. Is like the stuff that you love, like stuff that Johnny Cash, like love Johnny Cash. I have a very if you have that strong kind of connection to something that feels then corrupted by something new and something commercial and something watered down, something exploitative, something manipulative, then you're going to just react in this way of feeling hatred towards it. And it doesn't mean that thing is good or bad, or I mean, it probably is pretty bad, but I don't have that reaction to Dutch carnival music, which might be the same thing. It might be a corruption of traditional Dutch tunes or something like that. That might mean a lot to certain people. Have you ever heard of Brazilian funk?
No.
Okay, so it's basically like it's urban music of Brazil. It's like the trap, Brazilian trap. It is a wild overgeneralization. It has nothing to do with funk, but they just call it Brazilian funk. That's a wild overgeneralization, but that's from my perspective. And I've had so many Brazilian fans want me to talk about Brazilian funk and how they hate it so much. And I listen to it, and it's like, it's goofy music, but I don't have that frame of reference whatsoever. Same thing with reggaeton, which is, very popular in Caribbean countries. And I don't hate it. I really don't hate it. But some people have that reaction in a very deep way. And I think that's so interesting because it's always something that relates to your culture and you feel like it's a corruption of the culture. So I think it just speaks to our relationship to music, our relationship to what we want out of the music and what we feel, what we need from it, what we need back. And anything that feels corrupted, it's just, we're going to be like, no, this is bad. And I think that's just a thing that is interesting. And that's kind of what I was exploring with the contemporary Christian music video and also the video on the music that you hate. Yeah.
Man, that's so well done, dude.
Thanks, dude.
I feel better.
Thank you, man.
Having gotten that off my chest. So I want to talk about gear for a second.
Yeah.
A lot of my audience is very gear centric and gear centered. What's your relationship with gear? Is it something you think about a lot? Is it something you do a lot of research on, or is it like, I've got my things that I use and that's about it?
More and more, I have started looking more into gear and just becoming more, I don't want to call, I'm never going to be a gearhead, but just being more gear aware and tone aware too. I've since switched to the HX Stomp and Helix native and gotten really into IRs for those. Your multiple videos. Haven't you done a couple videos on the Stomp, the HX Stomp?
Yeah. And I'm exporting right now a video. We made our own impulse responses the other day. A friend of mine came up, and so we're diving into that realm now too.
Nice. Yeah. I'm never going to go that deep into creating my own IRs, but just a little bit, just a smidge, because for the longest time, and a lot, you'll notice this among a lot of jazz fusion musicians and jazz musicians. They'll be like, I got my instrument and I just know how this works and it's good and whatever. Gear, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to get this simple thing and the tone's going to come from the hands, and it very much does. But at the same time, the more you get into it, the more that you realize that tone and sound matter way more than note choice and rhythm. Well, maybe not rhythm, but like tone and sound matter a lot more than notes, especially if you're playing quote unquote simpler, which in a lot of ways is more appropriate for many, many styles of music, and also for bass players. You want to make that note count and you want to make that sound count. And that's just been something that I've been exploring a lot recently. So, for the longest time, I just had my Fender Mexican P bass, and I still love that instrument to death, but it can only do one sound really, and that's a Fender Mexican P bass. And so it's just been fun exploring different kinds of sounds,
I would agree with that tone is one of the most important parts of your playing. It's how people hear your voice, and how they remember,
There's a symbiotic relationship between your playing and your tone. And guitar players know this way more, I feel like, than bass players. Honestly, the bass tone, it's harder to pick up on nuances as a bass player, but they are very much there. But it's still very exciting to feel like when you have a different tone, you play differently. You play pretty radically differently in certain cases. On my active bass, I can play chords in a way that I would never be able to play chords on my passive P bass. And so just there's this whole vocabulary that I have now that I just wouldn't because the change in tone. And there's, such a relationship between the two when you're playing that it's something that I feel like I should have explored way sooner, and I'm playing catch up now. So it's actually videos like yours, which have given me actually a lot of stuff to work on and stuff to think about, that, YouTube is such a great resource for so many things. And I'm using YouTube now to learn a lot from my peers, which is, cool. It's like, this is how people look at my videos sometimes, which is like kind of cool, actually.
It's actually pretty helpful.
Yeah.
It is helpful in your own creation to do that. But I completely agree. Like the way you interact with an instrument is so heavily dependent on how that instrument sounds and how it's reacting with the amp and any kind of effects that you're using. I mean, even little things, so much as turning on a reverb or maybe in your case a compressor, is going to make you play the notes differently. It's going to change the rhythms you might choose, the voicings you might choose for chords and things like that. And it's incredibly important for players, I think, to, like you would try and understand theory and harmony, to understand tone in the same way, because again, it is part of that voice. The other side of it though is I see this sometimes on my channel in comment sections. People put the cart before the horse and start to worry about gear and their tonal choice more so than their playing and their musical choices, if that makes any sense.
It definitely does. And that's kind of why, I've avoided any kind of conversation, because I feel like for a certain kind of person, it's the feeling of the shiny object or wanting the shiny object, or like this, the choice paralysis between different pieces of gear, which I feel all the time. And I have the perspective of knowing what actually matters, which is the music making. The choice paralysis can I feel like can just overwhelm people, or at least, the focus is not on the music, it's on the things that make the music. So the things that make the music are important because of their facility, but you still need to make the music with them. And I feel like the depth of exploring music can go quite deep and way beyond, necessarily amp choice or guitar choice or string choice, but all of those things matter quite a lot too. So it's finding the right balance. And for me, it's a new exploration, but it's not the main exploration.
Yeah. Well, Adam, thanks so much, man. Dude. This has been awesome.
Thanks. Well,
really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun. I'm glad we talked about a lot of different things. And I feel like, with as crazy things are, there's a lot of stuff that will be changing and a lot of stuff that will be staying the same, but it's nice to at least stay on top of the things that are changing. So yeah, thanks for calling me.
So there you go. That was Adam Neely. If you're watching this on YouTube, you are probably familiar with Adam and his work. I've been a fan of his for quite some time now, so it's really cool to be able to sit and have that kind of conversation with him. If you're not familiar with him, though, absolutely go subscribe to his channel. All of his YouTube stuff and social media stuff is linked down below. Again, huge congratulations to Adam on 1 million subscribers. That's a big, big deal and very well deserved. The quality of content that dude puts out every week is unbelievable and and hard to match. He is a unique creator on this platform for sure. So now we're on to the last segment of the podcast. This is one of my favorite things to do. If you're new here, we do this every week. We take an original song submission from one of the listeners, from one of you guys, and we play it here on the podcast. This segment is sponsored by DistroKid. DistroKid is a service that takes your music and distributes it, publishes it to all of the music streaming platforms, Apple Music, Spotify, Pandora, all that stuff. They are linked in the description box down below. If you use the URL that I have linked down below, you'll save 7% off your first year's membership, and it just starts at $19.99 a year. I asked them to sponsor this segment of the podcast because I really like what they do. They've got some really cool features, and they take something that is really complicated and kind of hard to wrap your head around, and they make it really, really easy for writers, producers, musicians, creators to get their music out there. So thanks to DistroKid. And here's how this works. Every week, people send in their one original song to backstagejournalpod@gmail.com. So that's a email address I have set up just for this purpose. Submit an original song and give me a little information about you, about the song, maybe about your band, why you wrote the song, what you used to record the song. And every week we'll pick one and feature it here on the podcast. This week's submission comes from Cedric. Cedric is 25 years old from Quebec. And he said, the track I'm sitting in is something I recorded myself in my humble home studio to send to the band as a canvas for an upcoming rehearsal. It's called Interference. The funny thing is that I tracked the harmonic part first, and then something happened where some weird white noise was recorded at the same time. I was about to delete the take and then figured I would lean into it and take advantage of it. So the whole track revolved around this sound, and it basically named itself. I used that sound drum loops and tweaked one of your Helix amps. Oh, that's cool. Nice. To get the sound I was looking for. Hope you consider to feature it in the podcast. So submit your original stuff for the podcast. Again, send it into backstagejournalpod@gmail.com. Thanks, everyone, for listening or watching this week. If you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel or to the podcast on your favorite streaming service of choice, and we will see you guys next Wednesday. And without further ado, here is Interference by Cedric.